So I just got a Kragnos, and I spent some time thinking about and looking at some numbers and discussing in my Discord. Is Kragnos good? So let me show you kind of what I found out. But first, thanks to all my supporters, patrons, those of you that have donated art, and Baron of Dice. If you're gonna buy dice, you might as well use code MDG at checkout, or check out the link in the description below. It helps support the channel. It goes a long way. So first we have to kind of operationalize exactly what we mean. So what do we mean by good? Good does not mean fun. Good means it provides either a high value of damage or utility to the army that justifies the point cost. The point cost is a very important part of this equation. Or it enables a strategy in the army that would be otherwise unavailable, or good is also a relative term. So when we say good, it sort of means like, well, in comparison to what? So for the sake of comparison, we're going to compare Kragnos to Mega Boss on Makrusha and a Gatebreaker. They're all monsters. They all have large point costs. They all offer utility to the army. So let's have a look. So first, damage. So all of these three have ways of dealing damage that are either destructive bulk or impact mortals or I don't know. They all have sort of different ways, and it changes the math. But we can see from the numbers above that on average, if we sort of combine all these things together, that the one that deals the most damage is absolutely going to be the Mega Boss on Makrusha, the turn that he activates Destroyer. Kragnos, with all of his attacks, and this isn't super accurate, this is sort of like, because there's a lot of different situational things, right? But this is kind of like an estimate. Kragnos is going to be dealing about 21 damage, which is only 2.9 damage per 100 points. The Mega Boss with Destroyer is going to deal about the same damage, about 21 damage, and that's 4.6 damage per 100 points, so a significant increase. And Fort Kika, which is the Gatebreaker, is going to do about 13.3 damage at 2.8 damage per 100 points. So you can see that Kragnos and the Fort Kika actually do similar damage, and when I ran the numbers with the Mega Boss on Makrusha without Destroyer, he was in the same sort of range as Fort Kika and was in a similar damage per 100 point as the three of them. So if we're talking about which one does the most damage, Kragnos does the raw most damage consistently every turn. But if we're talking damage per point, it's going to be the Mega Boss on Makrusha, and it's certainly going to be the Mega Boss on Makrusha the turn that he activates Destroyer. So who does the most damage? Mega Boss on Makrusha absolutely does the most damage. So let's look at utility. So the Makrusha has a 12-inch move, Kragnos has a 10-inch move, and the Fort Kika has a 12-inch move. Cool. The Makrusha has 18 wounds, Kragnos has 18 wounds, and the Fort Kika has 35 wounds. Quite a bit different. The Makrusha has an 8 bravery, I mean, it's not going to come into effect too often. I think the most common one is going to be Heroic Recovery. So the Makrusha has a bravery of 8, Kragnos has a bravery of 10, and the Fort Kika has the worst bravery at 7. And then saves, the Makrusha has a 3-up save, Kragnos has a 2-up save, and the Fort Kika has a 4-up save. So 3-up, 2-up, 4-up. So then when I ran the numbers with how many wounds you actually have to deal to these guys, the Makrusha was the squishiest. You had to deal, in my calculations, including the saves and the wards, about 54 wounds on average before you kill him. So that means either you have to make your opponent make 54 saves, or you're dealing mortal wounds and skipping over those saves. So it's either that you have to force them to make 54 saves or deal mortal wounds, like in some combination. I mean, the math is kind of difficult when you're talking about mortal wounds, right? Kragnos has a 6-up ward, and he also has a 3d6 counterspell mechanic. So if a spell or the ability of an endless spell affects Kragnos, what you do is you take 3d6 and you roll the dice, and all you need is more than the casting value of the spell or of that endless spell. Not more than what the wizard that cast it casted, just more than the casting value. And you're doing it with 3d6. So even Blizzard has a fairly likely chance. It's on, like, it's less than 50%, but still, it's a pretty good chance that even Blizzard is just like, nope, you don't get your Blizzard. And if they threw a whole bunch of Primal Dice at it, Kragnos is just like, nope. So effectively what this means is that, you know, Kragnos doesn't get targeted with spells, and he doesn't get targeted with endless spells. It's just not going to happen, right? Your opponents just are going to choose not to do it. So that makes him incredibly survivable. And Big Drog Fort Kicka needs about 70 wounds. So of the three, the Maw Crusher is the weakest. He's the weakest. He's going to be the easiest to kill. But he is the fastest, and he's the only one that has true flight. Big Drog Fort Kicka can walk over terrain that isn't too high. I think it's 4 inches and under, right? So he can sort of fly, quote unquote, over terrain. And he can also, I think Long Shanks also lets him walk over some units that are small, but I can't remember exactly. But the Maw Crush is the only one that has true flight. But Kragnos is the one that he's not going to die. He's just not going to die. With a 2-up save and a 6-up ward and the ability to shut off spells, the only thing that really gets him is mortal wounds. So Bolt Boys just chew up Kragnos. They chew him right up. Two volleys from fully buffed Bolt Boys, like from 2 groups of 6 Bolt Boys, are going to kill a Kragnos every time. And that's his greatest weakness. The 6-up ward kind of hurts him. That's where he's going to be at his weakest. There's things that are just going to melt him. When it comes to taking objectives, the Mega Boss on Maw Crusher only counts for 5 on an objective, but Kragnos at his top bracket counts for 30 and degrades down to 18 at his lowest, and Big Drog Fort Kicka is 20 on objectives and he degrades down to 12. So in this regard, Kragnos is certainly the best at taking and holding objectives. I wonder what the math is on this per point. I bet you that Big Drog Fort Kicka has the most toes on objective per point. I didn't run the math, but that thought just occurred to me. I bet you that he is the most efficient. But Kragnos is 30 on an objective. Like, you're taking that objective, right? In terms of other utility, the Mega Boss on Maw Crusher can fly. He has Skull Shaking Bellow, which is when he issues a command to Iron Jaws, he can issue it up to 3 times. Very useful because it combos with Mighty Destroyer super, super well. Very nice. He also can take enhancements. So he can take Destroyer and he can take Fasten. So he has some pretty solid utility. Kragnos' utility is he has War Master. So he always counts as a general. So if your general is slain, you still count as having a general. It's a small thing, but it's something. He also he can't call the Wa because in Iron Jaws it requires that you have a Iron Jaws general, and same in Cruel Boys. There has to be a Cruel Boys general that fights. Kragnos also has the ability End of Empires, which is where he gives just like friendly units that are wholly within 12 inches a 3d6 charge. I think it's friendly. It might be destruction, but I think it's friendly. A 3d6 charge, so that's cool. And then he beats the tar out of monsters. He has an ability called Rampaging Destruction. You roll 2d6 and you multiply the numbers together and you deal that much damage to the monster, which is a lot. I mean, like, let's say, how many wounds does the average monster have? 7? Something more, sorry, not 7. The average monster has like 12 wounds. So multiplying 2 numbers together in 2d6, I mean, it's pretty good. You know, the average is 7, and so let's say it's a 3 and a 4, so that's 12. It's going to be a lot. That being said, however, if you do roll 7, nothing happens. So you have to not roll the most common number. But still, like, he's going to blow up. He's going to be a monster killer for sure. Definitely. And then Big Drog Fort Kicka has Long Shanks, which is like his fake flying. The Big Drog Fort Kicka also has an ability called Pulverizing Strike. So instead of making any attacks, you roll a die, and on a 4-up, you just deal 4d6 mortals. So it's a 50-50 Blizzard, essentially what it is. So this means that if he is being debuffed a ton, right, if it's like, oh, he has -1 to hit, -1 to wound, your opponent is on like a 2-up save ignoring a rend, you know, like he has the ability just to 50-50, like, well, I'm gonna hit you anyway with mortal wounds, which is cool. I think it sort of maths out to when your opponent has a 2-up save or better, or if you have like some serious debuffs that it kind of makes a big deal. Like if you're on -1 to hit, -1 to wound, if you're on -1 damage, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm still going to break through and deal 46 mortals. And then Big Drog Fort Kika also has Terror, which means that you can't do your Inspiring Presence within, I think it's 3 inches of him. It's basically if you're stuck in combat with him, you can't Inspiring Presence. So that has value. But again, here we are, where I think that the one that offers the most value, again, is the Maw Crusher. Skull Shaking Bellow is so good. Just fast and is so good. So if we're looking at what they are, like what they kind of bring to the table, what special roles they each bring, the Maw Crusher is the fastest. He's the most damage per point. The triple commands is significant, but the thing about him that really stands out and shines over Kragnos and Big Drog Fort Kika is that he's an Auric. He can issue and receive Mighty Destroyers. He can participate in smashing and bashing. He can issue and get bonuses from the Iron Jaws Wa. And when he charges and ends in combat, and he generates and gains the benefit of Big Wa points. So it sort of doesn't, in the 2 armies that the Mega Boss Maw Crusher can be in, he is synergizing with the rules and with the other units in a way that Kragnos and the Fort Kika just do not. They don't. Maw Crusher actually synergizes with his armies. Fantastic. Kragnos is the tankiest, and he's the best at holding objectives. And, I mean, the 3d6 charge is good, I guess. It's fine. It's not, I don't know, it's not as impactful as you would think, I guess. But if your opponent doesn't have like Bold Boys, if your opponent doesn't have anything that's really going to be able to put a ton of non-spell mortal wounds into Kragnos, he's not going to move. So I was thinking about how best to use him, and it's like, well, you crash him into your opponent early, like on turn 1, and whether or not he's joined by other units is irrelevant, and then he's going to take whatever objective that he's standing on. So he might take an objective out from under your opponent's feet, and then he is not going to move. He's going to sit there, he's going to deal his large amounts of damage, and he's going to be impossible to kill. So, I mean, it's one of those models that, like, good players know how to deal with, but more inexperienced players don't know how to deal with. Or some armies just aren't going to be able to deal with him at all, while some armies are going to be able to deal with him no problem. For example, Cruel Boy's going to melt Kragnos. Iron Jaw's going to have a really difficult time getting rid of Kragnos. Big Wa is going to have no problem with him. Your Wurgog Prophet, that's not a spell. His Wurgog Mask is not a spell, so you're going to be able to just like 2 turns of Wurgog Mask and he's toast. So seems good. And Big Drog Fort Kika is the prettiest, ? There's nothing that he does that the other 2, like, there's nothing that the Big Drog Fort Kika does that's better than the other 2. There's just nothing. He counts for more points than a Maw Crusher, but fewer points than Kragnos. He deals more damage per point than Kragnos. No, he doesn't even do that. I don't even know what he does. That's really that good. Smashes terrain. I don't know. He's fun. I've played him before. He's fun. So roles. What roles do these 3 fill? Well, the Maw Crusher offers a lot of utility to the army, and he can take advantage of the rules of the army. He also is the most mobile and hits the hardest. His role is very clear, and he is the best at it. And I've sort of just said all these things, but I'll say him again. Kragnos will stand on an objective. That is really all that he offers that the others do not. He will not be moved. He will, however, die to mortal wounds, just like everybody else. I would have preferred to have a worse save and a better ward save, to be honest. 3-up save, 5-up ward. That would make him better. And the Gatebreaker's in the middle. He is better at taking objectives than the Maw Crusher, but worse at dealing damage than Kragnos. I do not think he has a niche in Auric War Clans at this time. Lists. So you have a Kragnos, you want to play Kragnos. What army, what faction, what subfaction, what lists specifically are going to be the best for Kragnos? And after some consideration and discussions in my Discord, I've come to the conclusion that Iron Suns is likely the best faction in which to run Kragnos. I also believe it to be likely the most fun. 3d6 countercharging on your opponent's turn, that feels like a good time. I think it's going to be fun. So let's look at some example lists. So this is a list that I came up with myself. It's from Iron Suns. We have the Grand Strategy Crump 'em All with Inspired as our triumph. It's a 2-drop list. I didn't fit them specifically into their battle regiments, but it's a 2-drop list. We have 1980 points. We are running Kragnos, a Mega Boss on foot as our general with Mighty Wah Leader and Destroyer, a War Chanter with Get 'em Beat, a War Chanter with Fix and Beat, and a pouch of Null Dust. We have 2 units of Ardboys, a reinforced unit of Brutes, and a reinforced unit of Ragers. What we're doing in this list is we're going in with Ardboys, Brutes, and Ragers as a counter charge. So the way that you would play this list is you would... Kragnos doesn't commit early. Kragnos sort of moves up into the middle of the board and is going to stand hopefully on an objective in the middle of the battlefield, if that's the battle plan. And he's just going to stand there and challenge your opponents to come in. And then what you do with your Ardboys and your Brutes and your Ragers is you put them in such a position, like you move them up the battlefield. They are quite slow, right? But you move them up the battlefield into such a position where you're going to be threatening that counter charge, keeping in mind that 10 inches is the average counter charge. So if you move up and you're 13, 14 inches away, then you're obviously not going to charge. But I mean, you can still get long bomb 3d6 charges with Kragnos, right? If you're holding within 12 of them. But if you move up and then it's your opponent's turn, they have to kind of end their turn quite far away from you, or else they're going to threaten, or else you're going to threaten that charge, that 3d6 counter charge on their turn. So, seems good to me. And then I was also talking with Aaron Newbaum, and he sort of agreed with me that Iron Sense is going to be the best place to play Kragnos, and he came up with a slightly different list than mine. So again, he's got Crumple Maul inspired 2 drops. His list is 1960. He's running Kragnos, a Mega Boss on foot with Mighty Wall Leader and Destroyer, a Get 'em Beat War Chanter, and a Fix and Beat War Chanter with a pouch of Null Dust, 2 times 10 Ardboys, and then a 5 unit of Brutes instead of a 10 unit of Brutes, and a Hack and Crew, and an Iron Skull Boys. The Iron Skull Boys are just there to take objectives and to hold objectives and zone out the back line and what have you. And the Hack and Crew is going in, right? The Hack and Crew is going in, either turn 1, turn 2, build up a little momentum, get that 3d6 charge, and he's going in and having a good time. But it looks like a lot of fun. So I would love to hear in the comments below or in my Discord if you have experience playing Kragnos and what that experience is like. But until then, like, subscribe, and wah.